Like to call this evening's King's Board of Education regular board meeting to order. Mr. Furness, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Belfram,
Here.
Mr. Bidwell,
Here.
Ms. Cowan,
Here.
Mr. Egan. Here. Ms. Phillips.
Here.
Could you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Furness?
Mr. Bidwell,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan,
Here.
Mr. Egan.
Yes, sorry.
Yes. Mr. Belfram,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
Let's, sorry, let's try to get through this. Next on the agenda, reports and presentations. Mr. Furness, do you need a motion for this, sir?
No.
All right. Mr. Sears, if you would, please, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Last night, the King Schools community was dealt a heavy blow. We learned of the passing of beloved Spanish teacher, George Gonzalez. Our hearts are heavy today and we want to take a few minutes this evening to remember and celebrate the way George and Gonzalez impacted our students and our community. Before we begin, I would like to take, and please join me in a moment of silence in remembrance of George. Thank you. George Gonzalez was a beloved Spanish teacher at King's High School. This fall, he started his 34th year in education. He spent his first 2 years at Fairfield Local Schools in Leesburg, Ohio, before coming to King's. He received his undergraduate degree from Youngstown State and his graduate degree from the University of Cincinnati. He was married to J.F. Burns Elementary English language learner teacher, Karen Gonzalez, who met when they worked together here at King's High School. He and Karen have a daughter, Lucy, who is a junior at King's High School. Senor Gonzalez coached and did a numerous amount of things and impacted our community in many ways. And I'm going to go through a long list of many of the activities and things that he was involved in. Senor Gonzalez coached junior high football for several years. He was a department chair at our high school, a buddy teacher to newly employed teachers. He ran the scoreboard for men's and women's basketball, traveled to Guatemala with the Cooperative for Education program to bring computers and textbooks to children in need. In recent years, George was the diversity and inclusion coordinator of the district, where he facilitated the diversity and inclusion community task force. He moderated many student clubs, including the Knights Organizing Against Racism and the Spanish Club. He recently completed 8 years of service on the Ohio Education Association Board of Directors and had accepted a position representing OEA members on the Ohio Education Standards Board. He was an ambassador to the Hawksworth Blood Center and started the King's High School blood drive to benefit blood cancer patients. George had a passionate love for cars and often talked about it. And even as late as 3 weeks ago, George was considering and wanted to create a ping pong club at King's High School because there were students that had that interest and need. And George wanted to give them that opportunity. Over the course of the day, we've received a significant amount of outpouring from the community, current students, fellow teachers, and former students. Some of the things that have been said about George today was George was an incredibly kind, compassionate, dedicated, strong, and impactful leader and educator. He was an advocate for all. He has blessed and inspired those who have known him. He was always willing to do anything that was asked of him. His willingness to stand up for the students of Ohio and public education was example to all. Thank you for being just such a strong advocate and supporter of public education. Thank you, George, for being a gentle but strong leader in education. Your love and advocacy reached so many. We had one student reach out, and I'm just going to read this from a previous student. I can honestly say he was genuinely one of the kindest souls and such a great person. It was very hard going to a school where there was a strong lack of diversity, and this man being the leader of the Diversity Inclusion Task Force made such a huge difference. It felt as though it was a safe place for myself and other students who were different. I wish he could have known how many lives he was changing and making better. He was truly broken down barriers for so many people to feel accepted no matter who they are. He was also hilarious and I absolutely loved going to his class. Not only was he a great teacher, he just had an amazing spirit. He also loves some Bruce Springsteen. I'm in disbelief, but while he may not be here physically, he lives on through his impact and his leadership. A huge inspiration to me, sending love to his beautiful family and loved ones. George Gonzalez was a great man, a great educator, and a huge loss for this district. This time, if there's any board commentary, I'll turn it over to the board.
Yeah, just one moment, sir. Let's finish this.
My youngest daughter was one of the countless students whose lives Mr. Gonzalez touched. And I know I got to know Mr. Gonzalez really well working with the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. As many of you have heard me say about the amazing people involved and when in the task force. And when I think of that, the first person I always thought of was Mr. Gonzalez. He was really a gift to our students, his passion for education, his advocacy, his interest in the well-being of every one of our students. His impact on our community is just immeasurable. I'm honored to have known him. I'm honored that he was with part of our community. And this loss is just immeasurable. And my heartfelt sympathy goes out to his family, because as much as we feel this loss, I can only imagine what they're going through. But I just hope that all of us think about Mr. Gonzalez as we move forward and the things that he wanted for this community. And as we move into the future, let's remember that. Let's be kind to each other. Let's remember what a great place this is and how many good people we have. And let's just appreciate all of us, just like Mr. Gonzalez would want us to. Thank you.
I just wanted to say a few words. I didn't think I'd get choked up, but hearing some of these things. George and I, we were colleagues, served on a lot of committees together. A lot was said, good listener, who would really research his thoughts. And when he spoke, people really listened, just a great quality. I had the pleasure of teaching Lucy, I guess it would have been about 5 years ago. And even at that time, in her young age, I could see some of the qualities of George and Karen in her at that time. And, that's kind of nice to see that that will continue on. Thoughts and prayers to the Gonzalez family. Thank you.
I just wrote down a few words about Mr. Gonzalez. The first one that came to mind was the role model. He was certainly a role model, not only to teachers, to administrators, to students, and to the community at large. Unconditional love. He had that uncanny way of figuring out exactly what students needed, and he went above and beyond to provide that. He had high expectations, but the expectations were always what he knew students could reach for. He was hardworking. He was dedicated to Kings. Without question, he would do anything at all for the students, for the community. He wanted everyone to see what he saw, especially for the kids, to know that kindness and understanding would take you far. Critical thinking was imperative. Did you really realize what you could be if you just try? He would come to the elementary buildings with Spanish students to give the fourth graders an opportunity to know a little bit about culture, a little bit about what to expect when you come to the high school, and give the high school students an opportunity to be role models for the students. He was always teaching, and he could walk that walk and say, just look at what we're doing. You're going to be great. Empathy, helping students to walk in others' shoes, especially taking them to foreign countries and showing and helping them to understand what it's like to have or not have. I have to say, I'm a much better person for knowing him. Rest in peace, Mr. Gonzalez.
Should have went first. I didn't know George that well, but I remember when I got on the board and I started making an effort to come to different events here, particularly at the high school. It seemed like George was always here. And every corner I turned, there he was. Hey, Mr. Belfram, how's everything? And asked me how I'm doing. He knew who my son was. My son had always wanted him in class. He never got him, but he knew who he was. Always asked me about him. Go to things like the multicultural night at JF Burns, and there he was with a dish he prepared, having everyone try his food. He was just a genuinely nice man. I had the opportunity to sit with him and Karen and Lucy at an event at the Warren County Career Center where Karen won an award for distinction for her teaching efforts, and just a wonderful family. Sometimes you meet couples and you can just tell how much they really love each other, and that it hasn't changed. That's them. So I can only imagine, I'm sure as we all can, how much that hurts Karen and Lucy. And I think the words of my colleagues have been well said, and words of students past and present really sums it up of who he was. He's a tremendous loss for this community, tremendous loss to his family and friends, but we'll never forget him here. So as we say, once you're a knight, you're always a knight. So rest well, George. We'll miss you. May I give this gentleman just a few moments during this time? Sir, if you could, if the board is,
Yes.
all right, sir, if you would, please.
My name is C.L. Husband. I served on the board for a long time. I knew George. I knew George well. George is like a matador at what he did, but he was also fun as a Don Quixote. But the matador side of him was always very important. He taught my kids, I'm gonna miss the guy. I went to Seville, Spain, made a special point of going to the bull ring because I wanted to get him a poster. So I got him a poster of a matador fighting a bull with his cape in front of him. And that was George. He was always out there. He was always willing to help. And I appreciated those times that we had together. And I appreciated that time that I was on the board. Thank you for this moment.
Thanks, sir.
you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Beltram, can I close this section, please?
Yes.
Thank you. So a few things that, a lot was said about George, and there were some pivots to our agenda for this, but tonight that I was planning on providing an update on my first 100 days in Kings Local School District, as tomorrow is that day. But we push pause on this because I think the priorities are a little bit different tonight. But I'll just say that I visited almost every classroom in this district over the course of the last few weeks. I've met with many community members and parents in an effort to learn as much as I can about Kings Local School District. I've seen our students perform and compete at extremely high levels, and I've been seeing celebrations of their successes. I see the daily efforts that our teachers and staff go each and every day to support the students in our district. But over the last 24 hours, I've learned what makes Kings such a special place. I've seen a community that will rally around and during times of need. I've seen teachers, counselors, administrators, psychologists, parents, community members that drop everything to support the people within this district. I've seen the resources, the programs, the tools that enable us to support the well-being of our students and staff, especially each and every day, but especially during days like today in times of crisis. I've seen the community partnerships that we've created and established with Beach Acres and Companions on a Journey, who drop everything and send resources and support to our high schools, our high school today, to support our students and staffs. I see the collaboration and relationships we have with neighboring districts, including Mason City Schools, who, after long conversations late last night with Mr. Cooper, and they sent us a therapy dog today and 3 counselors to support our students. I see our dogs today, Ollie and Raven from SLE and KME, to come over and support our students and work with our kids. And Gilly, I can't forget Gilly. He was on his back most of the day. The foundation of this district is what I've learned over the last 24 hours is the foundation of this district is built on relationships. Each person up here tonight spoke on that. It's about the people. It's about the people that make this a fantastic place. It's not about the things. It's not about what happens. It's about the people. And that's what I'm so impressed about. And although today was an extremely rough day for so many people, and we're going to have rough days ahead, I'm extremely proud to be the superintendent of this district. I'm proud of this administrative team for spending significant amounts of time last night, all throughout the night in preparation for today. Proud of our teachers for leaning in, supporting each other. I'm proud of them delivering tough message to our students. I'm proud of our community and parents for stepping up and doing everything that we need to be successful. It's a great place. The future is extremely bright in Kings, and I'm proud to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sears. Thank you, everyone, for your kind words. On the agenda, there are no legislative updates for this evening. Is public participation? King's Board of Education welcomes and encourages visitors to participate in their meetings. The board president will recognize anyone who wishes to speak during the public presentation portion of the meeting. Once recognized, you will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please make sure to sign up or to sign in so that the board president knows to call on you. We ask that speakers avoid personal attacks on individuals during their public address to the board. If an individual has an issue with an employee, we ask that you request a private meeting with the superintendent or that employee's direct supervisor. Please keep in mind that Board of Education meetings are held so that the board can conduct their business in public. The board president is the spokesperson for the board and may need to consult with other board members in order to respond to the public. If a question from the public can be answered immediately, it may be. However, if time is needed to study the issue, the board may choose to make a statement at a later date. And if I may, as we've said this consistently the last several months, if we could just respect everyone's time and afford everyone that in their 3 minutes, we would appreciate that. First up this evening is Dylan Ward.
Hi, I'm Dylan Ward. I'm a junior at King's High School, and I'm here to talk about why it's important for the parents of King's students to show up and vote in the school board election on November 2nd. At the August 17th King's board meeting, Karen Burton gave the board a proposed board resolution on behalf of herself and her running mates, Scott Sheeter and Ray Geyer, and others in the King's community. The proposal supposedly sought to prevent the teaching of critical race theory in our schools, but not a single candidate running for school board is campaigning for CRT to be taught in King's in the first place. And BGS can't seem to come up with any real proof that it's even here. Instead, they put out sound bites on social media that lack context and fail to tell the whole story instead of focusing on actual issues. How do I know this? Because my mom asks me every time she sees something like this on Facebook. From my experience in watching the last presidential election, the BGS strategy seems to be to create discord, confusion, and fear in our community. I'm here to tell you what their proposed board resolution means to be as a student. The proposed board resolution actually isn't limited to CRT. Not only does it prohibit a teacher's ability to lead discussions in class, it puts limits on students' views as well. And what is even worse is that BGS wrote it in a way that also silences our speech, and not just on CRT, but on all political views, as well as views on nationality, race, ethnicity, sex, and religion. If we can't discuss issues related to these ideas, we can't have a debate club, or a Black History Club, or an environmental club. No fellowship of Christian athletes or fellowship of Christian students, because the very existence of these clubs could be argued to mean they are morally or intellectually superior to other ideologies. It could even affect our ability as students to enroll in college level courses like CCP. Remember the students who got extra credit for going to meet the candidates night? Their assignment was to write about the candidates' views. This exercise in democracy wouldn't be allowed under a BGS mandated curriculum. Bottom line, the King's voters deserve more than sound bites and false narratives, and our education depends on voters being smarter than that. But to the people who signed the petition to adopt resolution to disavow critical race theory, did you actually read the full documents that were presented in your name? Because if you thought you signed something that only covered CRT and only applied to teachers, maybe you should go back and reread what was submitted. To Karen Burton, Ray Geyer, and Scott Sheeter, I'm an intelligent, critical thinker with a mind of my own, and I cannot be indoctrinated. Thank you.
Next is Mr. Ray Geyer.
Hello, I'm Ray Geyer, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I was sad to hear that Mr. George Gonzalez had been hospitalized, and I join everyone with prayers and condolences to his family. He was a great representative to our school district, and he will be missed. Today's agenda includes the approval of modifications to a number of policies. I attended the work session last week and noticed that there was limited discussion to the changes to these policies. I would have expected, since this is the first time these policy changes were presented in an open board, in an open session, that each policy change would get an explanation of what prompted the changes, what are we expecting to correct because of the change, and a summary of the changes. There were a few that were discussed, but not all of them. There was no indication as to why they were required. Today, these policies come up for a second reading, and from the information provided, there's no indication that this level of detail is going to be provided. I respectfully request the board address this as part of the second reading and also place those statements into the minutes for all of us to see and hear and understand. This would give us, as parents and community members, the correct understanding of the intentions of the board and reduce any speculation, plus allow us to comment on the changes being considered. One of the changes is for public participation at board meetings. That is one of a lot of concern to a lot of our parents and community members. The board has always done a great job respecting our First Amendment rights, and this particular change is going against that direction. Thank you.
Next is Lauren Smith.
Thank you, King's School Board and King's Administration, for having me today. My husband and I are proud parents of children within the King's School District. I'll jump right in. I'm sure you've heard and have seen the obsession with CRT with some within our own community. Everything diverse is being rolled into this term, including social emotional learning, along with the school district's anti-racism resolution. What the community doesn't need or want is anyone that is responsible for or supportive of racist and homophobic viewpoints. There still seems to be some confusion of what racism looks like, so I wanted to share some examples. Referring to the current pandemic as the China virus, reposting memes supporting the border wall. Oh, and the best is reposting a meme of Hitler, finding it interesting that he was the Time magazine's Man of the Year. Why anyone would use the word interesting instead of finding it disturbing is beyond me. These are real examples of not respecting or supporting diversity and inclusion. There have been many false accusations against the King's Diversity Inclusion Parents Task Force. What is true is that we're simply parents, diverse parents, and not just diverse on race, but gender, religion, socioeconomic, political views, and sexual orientation that have a mission to make sure that every child and or administrator that walks through the King's doors or is on King's properties is protected from bullying or racism. And for the King's families, help push for procedures that allows for prompt resolution to verbal or physical incidences, including our students. At the D&I meetings, we share personal experiences within the King's School District, along with stories for those that are afraid to have a voice. Stories shared by some parents are gut-wrenching. Bullying on the bus, harassed at school simply because a child lives in a same-sex household. The N-word being verbalized at school, making that Black child feel alone and afraid and very much so less than his or her peers. The children that have been affected will never forget. These traumatic incidents will be embedded as a part of their history for the rest of their lives. So for those who are spreading mistruths, stop dismissing the great work that parents have and are doing to provide a safe space for our children. By the way, that's not suppression, that's reality. It is our job to protect each child from this type of malicious behavior. That's what motivates our group to think and do the hard work. I do want to take some time to respectfully thank Mr. George Gonzalez for his passion, his dedication and love for our Kings community, including his leadership with Kings Diversity and Inclusion. His work will not be forgotten and it won't stop.
Your 3 minutes.
Well done, sir. You'll be missed. Please vote.
Next is Scott Sheeter.
Thank you, board members. First, want to start off just, expressing my sympathy for the Gonzalez family. I did not know Mr. Gonzalez, but hearing all the great words about him, he was a great man and a great member of this community, and he will be missed. But there is something else I do want to talk about tonight. And I want to make sure the board is aware of this because a student came and told this to us, but the student was afraid to file any reports because of what would happen to them. First, as was mentioned back in the September board meeting about having a Black Lives Matter flag flying in a biology classroom, that is a political organization. What happened about a week and a half ago was in a biology class, a teacher taught about how to defund the police. That should not be taught in our schools. That is anti-US political speech. CRT, call it what you want. It's not right. It should not happen. This really personally offends me because I have family members who are in law enforcement. I have a son who wants to be a police officer. And we're teaching our kids to go and defund the police in biology class. It's not social studies, it's not history, it's biology. And this was a substitute teacher who did this. So this person felt so comfortable that they could do this, that they did it. We need to have policies that stop this. That's why we want that resolution passed. We want to stop the talk like this. Our resolution would allow you to have conversations, both sides of the conversation, not a one-sided conversation about defunding the police. And it's really sad that we have students who are afraid to report this because of what might happen to them. What's the board going to do to stop this? Thank you.
Next is Luis Goodman.
Once again, I'm going off of topic. What I wrote down I was going to talk about, I'm not talking about. I want to just tell a little story myself about Mr. Gonzalez. Both of my children had Mr. Gonzalez, and I was really glad to see his birth date on there because I was trying to figure out how old he was when we first met him, my husband and I, when our boys were in school. They loved Mr. Gonzalez, and he came probably around 1990, 1992, something like that, when my oldest son transferred here from Yavana, where he was a bilingual in Hebrew. And after he met Mr. Gonzalez, he said, wow, I wish Hebrew would be fun like Spanish. He said, Mr. Gonzalez makes it so much fun. And Hebrew just isn't as much fun as Spanish is. Then fast forward 5 years, my other son got Mr. Gonzalez and he said, Alan, you're right. It's fun taking Spanish, but it's not fun taking Hebrew, which you have to learn for your bar mitzvah. So I just thought that was a compliment to Mr. Gonzalez, somebody that I had only seen twice. And the last time I saw him was just last month when we were here and he gave his speech. And I said, oh, golly, he's really gotten older. But then again, I thought I'm 35 years older too. So a lot of people change in 35 years. But that wasn't what my original thing was going to be about tonight. It was going to be about division in this school district, division in this, this race for being a school board member. I was hoping everybody would keep it very respectful to Mr. Gonzalez and not do anything controversial. But since the first speaker came up and is accusing 3 of the candidates, once again, being accused by somebody, totally unprofessional. He's a young person, so you can't really hold it against him. But I'm just sickened by the fact all of the untruths that are going on about the three people I am supporting and being allowed, and people are believing it. I just think that's enough of what I'm going to say because I wanted to honor Mr. Gonzalez, but I think it's pretty terrible.
Next is Sandy Christoph. Apologize. Did I say your last name right, ma'am? It's Christoph?
Hi, my name is Sandy Christoph, and I also have children that have had Mr. Gonzalez in class and loved him. So I want to express my condolences for that. I also want to, tonight, I want to talk a little bit about how great it's been to see the involvement of the community in this race. When I first started coming to school board meetings about 2 years ago, because of my interest in the levy, there were only 3 of us in the room, month after month. So I really like to see that there's a lot more involvement here and people that are taking an interest. And it's not just, it's about policy involvement and everything. And I think that we're all excited about the opportunity to take a new look at things and problems or policies or opportunities that have been around for years. We're going to get some new eyes on them. There's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. And I just want to challenge all of the candidates going into the end of this race to be professional and to be the kind of candidates that we want on our school board, to be people that are positive and accepting, regardless whether you're a winner or a loser, and to show some kindness. That's it.
Next is John Skrull.
Thank you, board, for allowing me to speak tonight. Before I get in with my message, I do have a statement for Mr. Sheeter. Today, we are mourning the loss of George Gonzalez and celebrating his life. And you want to talk about defund the
Mr.
police.
Skrull, could you hold his time, Mr. Furness? Let's address us and do this.
All right.
Public
So
participation.
I was planning on coming here tonight, speaking about something totally different, but the news of Mr. Gonzalez's passing has made me reconsider what I want to speak about. I had known Mr. Gonzalez for only a short period of time, but in that time, I've gotten to see how wonderful he was and how much he loved and respected our schools. He was an amazing person who will be missed tremendously. Being a leader in our diversity and inclusion task force at our schools, he loved everyone. And he was a great role model, not just for his students, but everyone he came into contact with. This morning, telling my daughter that her Spanish teacher passed away was one of the hardest conversations I have had to have. I can only hope that her memories of Mr. Gonzalez are as great as those that I've seen many people share today. As I reflect over the past couple of months, in addition to Mr. Gonzalez, I have had the privilege of meeting many wonderful people in our community. Most of them have had great things to say about Kings. A few of them had some not so great things to say about Kings, but I don't view those as negative items. I view those as opportunities to improve as a district, as families, and as citizens. It's time to put aside the negativity and focus on some positivity for a change. I love Kings, but are we a perfect district? No, we are not. While we do have our challenges, I think we need to celebrate our victories. We need to celebrate our students who were presented with Student of the Quarter awards just last week. We need to celebrate our academic achievers who get recognized at our home football games. We need to celebrate our Hard Hat Awards, which are presented to community members and staff who embrace the employability model of it's cool to use our hands again. We need to celebrate that POTH is back at Columbia. We need to celebrate our athletics teams and our performing arts programs for successful fall seasons and demonstrating the King spirit. We need to celebrate our students who will receive the Ohio Means Jobs validation seal on their diploma for graduation. And we need to celebrate our educators who pour so much into our children to provide them with an excellent education. After all, that is the root of what we celebrate here at King's: excellence, both inside the classroom and outside the classroom. Let's please join together to keep it that way. Thank you.
Next is Janelle Goff.
It's been a tough day for the Kings community. Last night, we lost a beloved teacher, Mr. George Gonzalez. In September, him and I were joking around about how well the Spanish department teaches our students, sometimes too well. I went back today and listened to his speech from the school board meeting a month ago, and ironically, he stated that his why for being an educator is to leave the world a better place. Well, Senor Gonzalez, you succeeded. This world is a better place because of you. So to honor him, I think we should all think about how we can leave the world a better place. I think we should all consider how we can help the students of King's. I want to start by thanking the educators of King's School District. As George stated last month, every employee at King's is an educator. So whether you are a classroom teacher, an administrator, a bus driver, a custodian, a food service worker, or a nurse, the community thanks you for your work in educating our students, not only in academics, but in life lessons as well. I want to thank the current Board of Education for their dedication to serving our district. You have served our community during some of the most difficult years in our history. Your time, your professionalism, your compassion, and your integrity does not go unnoticed. Our community thanks you. Mr. Belfram, Mrs. Phillips, and Mrs. Cowan, I look forward to working with you in the future to take care of our precious school district. While I know that our future votes won't always align, I am confident that we will always try to do the best for our community. So let's continue Mr. Gonzalez's work with diversity and inclusion. As an active member of the task force, he worked to make every student in our schools feel safe, included, and valued. We can continue his work and take King's to the next level of kindness and acceptance. Lastly, I want to touch on academic excellence. After listening to past meetings, I believe some people have lost sight of why our school district exists. Our students deserve better. Our parents and taxpayers deserve better too. We all desire to live in a high-performing district that values academic excellence, opportunities, and experiences to make great citizens of our country. So as we navigate through this very difficult time, I hope we can come together to unite Kings. Take a minute this week and go hug an educator. Shake the hand of someone who doesn't look like you do. And most importantly, go make the world a better place. Thank you.
Next is Dana Gendro.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak to you. I wasn't going to come tonight because of the emotion, but George would be here. George would have come no matter what. I want to thank all of you for serving this great district and everything that you do and continue to do. George was so proud of this place and all of the accomplishments and the progress that we have made as a community, to not be the ones with the negative news stories. We are Kings. And I just want to thank everybody. And for those departing the board, thank you so much for your service. Mr. Bidwell, thank you for stepping up. He saved me in a math class where my son didn't seem to understand that you have to pay attention all the time. So I loved the tough love. But really, I just wanted to say thank you. And I appreciate everything that you do day in and day out. And we are at a crossroads, but we're going to get there. And Jorge, as I love to call him, he couldn't do Zoom meetings very well, but he was a phenomenal human being, and we can never forget that. And his work will not stop, not while I'm here. Thank you.
Next is Sarah Spencer.
Good evening. Thank you for letting each of us speak. I know it's been such an emotional and hard day for all of you. This school is really an extension of our family. And I think most families inside of this building and the other buildings on our grounds would say the same thing. And today is a day that we would hug our families a little bit tighter. I think many of us as parents are doing that. And so for me, I want to hug you all tightly today. I want you to know how grateful we are for the work that you do. The tireless work, it goes so far, so much further beyond a meeting on a Tuesday evening. You continue to fight. You do it respectfully, you do it lovingly, and you do it with all of our children's best interests at heart. And you're fighting for the next generation as well. While nothing is perfect, I believe that our words matter, and I believe that we need to speak to the good that is going on. And there's a verse that I cling to quite frequently, and it says, "The Lord gives and the Lord takes away." And the ending part says, "But blessed be the name of the Lord." But it's also talked about as, "But we will continue to sing praises." And I want us to continue to sing the praises of all of our educators, like Janelle said, every single person that's here day in and day out, to our substitutes, to the people who pop in, to the community that steps up to serve us when we are in need. We have to remember that we are doing good work. We have to remember that we have good kids. And I am a very, very proud member of this family, and my kids are as well. And I just want to give a special thank you to our high school teachers today who crossed the line of just being a teacher, and they were vulnerable with our kids, and they shared their feelings, and they allowed our kids to share their feelings as well. I know that my children were especially touched by each of that today. So thank you for all that you do and all that you continue to do.
Karen Burton.
I hear a lot of campaign messages here tonight and at last month's meeting, and I have never thought that that's what this forum is for. When I come before the board, I come because I have a concern or a message that I want you to hear. We have other forums for campaign speeches. I know today's been a difficult day for the district, and I can tell with heavy hearts, I think you've done an awesome job of I know it had to be difficult to even hold this meeting this evening. What I wanted to talk about was policies. I'm going to go ahead and talk about them because it's on the agenda. There's 20 policies that were recommended to the board last week, and they were not discussed by the board members. And I have seen that in the past when other policies are brought to the board, they're not discussed. They're presented, here they are. And I'm sure that you do all read through them individually, but they aren't discussed in the public forum. Nobody asked any questions. Nobody asked for any tweaks to clarify language. And some of them are not clear. As I've been reading through them, they just could use a tweak to just make it more clear. It's on tonight's agenda to approve those 20 policies. And my request is that the board would spend some time explaining why each of these 20 policies needs changes and to clearly explain what each change means to the students, the parents, the teachers, the administrators, and the community, because that's what the policies do. These change to a policy means a change to how things will be done. I understand there may not be time for that this evening, and I'm requesting that approval of all the policies that are not discussed this evening, but delayed until after the board can discuss the changes for each policy in a public meeting.
That concludes this evening's public participation. I know you are, sir. Oh, sure, Mr. Lazarus, we'll allow it. If the board is amenable to that.
My name is John Lazarus, and I was superintendent at King's 2 different times. I know Mr. Bidwell knows me, and I was superintendent from 92 to 96. And I also superintendent here a few years ago for a few months. And by the way, the board owes me money. I didn't take any money for the 5 or 6 months I was superintendent. So
Statute of limitations have expired, John.
what's that? I want to say back to those no statute of limitations for stupidity either. But anyway, I'm only kidding you. But anyway, I wanted to tell a story about Mr. Gonzalez. As we all know, he taught Spanish, and both my children took Spanish from him, and both of my children graduated from school here at King's. I left King's after 4 years, not because I wanted to, but because my children were going to school here, and I didn't want to be superintendent where my children went to school. And I'm glad I didn't, because my son was very successful here, and I attribute the King's teachers and the staff because he was valedictorian. He got accepted to Harvard. He got a full scholarship to Miami. My daughter works for NBC, and she interviewed George Clooney last week. And during the interview, George Clooney said, "Where are you from?" to my daughter, Lainey. She said, "I'm from Kings Mills, Ohio." And he said, "Did you go to King's High School?" And she said, "Yes." And he said, "I went to Mason. We were rivals." So we got some publicity for King's with George Clooney. But George, when I think I hired George. And when I interviewed George, he was a Spanish teacher, of course. And we interviewed him, and he did very well. And we knew we were going to hire him. So we left the office, my office. And I said to the principal, I said, we didn't even ask him if he could speak Spanish. I thought, I don't even know if he can say one word. So I said, tell him to come back here. So that's all I needed, being a new superintendent, and hire somebody that could speak Spanish. So he came back in my office, and I said, can you say anything in Spanish to me? He said, yeah. He said, Taco Bell. So I said, well, we'll hire you now. It's enough. So, but George, it was, as everyone said today, he was a very compassionate, very dedicated to his work. And I'm sure, I know he'll be missed. And like my children said today, my son said, I still use the Spanish George taught me, Mr. Gonzalez taught me, and my daughter said it too. She interviewed J-Lo a few months ago, and she said she spoke Spanish to her. So she said, I have to give credit to Mr. Gonzalez. So once again, I also came here for another reason, to congratulate Mr. Sears. I never realized I was that old, that Mr. Sears was a student of mine in a college course, not junior high or high school. I'm not that old, right? And he was a very good student, so he made a good choice. He took a class from me. What was the class on? Being a superintendent, wasn't it? Yeah. So if he's failed anything, it's my fault. So. But I know I feel very sincerely, and since I was superintendent here, there's been a few other people here, and I made it a point tonight because I wanted to not only say something about Mr. Gonzalez, but to congratulate Greg and tell the board they did good job in hiring him. And I was county superintendent, and I know I talked to Mr. Isaacs a lot, and we both agreed you couldn't have found a better choice in the tri-state area. So I wish him the best, and I wish the board the best. And thank you for the time. I'm sorry I didn't sign in, but.
No, that's 3 minutes though.
And
Mr.
Kings
Lazarus.
is, yeah. I thought after the money you guys owe me, I should get another 3 minutes.
Oh.
Yeah, so, but thank you, sir. Thank
You're
you.
welcome, sir. Next on the agenda are the consent approval items for the treasurer.
Mr. Belford, we'd ask for action on items 1 through 3.
All right.
So moved.
Second. So moved for action items. One.
Yeah.
through eight? So moved. May I have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion. Are there any questions? Mr. Furness?
Mr. Egan? Yes. Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Belfram?
Yes.
Mr. Bidwell?
Yes.
Ms. Cowan?
Yes.
I did want to report on item 4. Probably everyone here has received a postcard from the county auditor in the last few days. And so I've gotten a few phone calls from the community. So I thought this evening would be a good opportunity to talk about what those cards mean and maybe debunk some concerns folks have. We are in our 3-year update of property values. Property values are reevaluated every 6 years, but in the 3-year period, there's an update. And unless you have really not been paying attention, property values have been on the move due to sales. There are supply and demand issues. And as we've heard tonight, we have a fantastic community. It's a great place to live. And so that helps contribute to home prices. It looks like the update right now, it will be around a 14% on average, 14% increase in residential properties. Some may be higher, some may be lower. And a lot of folks with seeing that have called me concerned they're going to see significant increase in their taxes. The way it works in Ohio is that House Bill 920 was enacted in the mid-70s during a time of high inflation. A young county auditor by the name of George Voinovich wrote House Bill 920. It didn't seem to doom his career. He moved forward. That effectively, as property goes up in value, that a rollback of the tax rates occur. And that's been happening for the last 40 years. In Kings, we have a tax rate voted of about 70 mils, and the effective rate, which is what everyone pays, is around 37 mils. And that gap occurs as property values go up. It's designed to equalize taxes and insulate homeowners from inflation. With our update and our 14% increase in values, we anticipate there will be a like decrease in the effective rate to equalize taxes. And in talking with Matt Nolan, our county auditor, it would appear that the county commissioners are going to take action to lower or not collect a couple of their countywide levies in 2022 that should ensure, unless it's just an exceptional situation, that there won't be a tax increase in Kings for 2022. As I said, I've had some residents call. I've given them my number, encouraged them to call me back. The exceptional case would be is that if your property goes up significantly more than the 14%, you could see that occur. At the same time, if your value doesn't go up at all, your taxes could go down. Those folks never call me, ever. Usually that's the case where they think a mistake has been made and they don't want to hear back. Wanted to just update the board on that. We've talked about that on a number of occasions. As I said, the property value cards are out. We should have the final numbers first week of December. We also have the reduction factors and know what the actual tax rates are. And then we can isolate that impact more carefully for folks that maybe their situation turned out differently for whatever the reason. But in general, that's what it looks like in talking with Mr. Nolan over the last couple of weeks.
Is there a way to share that what their values were for them to find out? Because the discrepancy now is I've got this number Because they're paying attention to it, but they don't know how much. Is it going to be 14%? Is it going to be nothing? Is it going to be more than that?
So if you go to the county auditor's website, you can look your property up by your address, by your name, and you'll have 3 years of history of what your values have been. And it has your 3 years worth of tax bills out there. And so that's a great place, great resource. I recognize not everyone is a technology guru. And so if that's a problem, I know Mr. Nolan's office helps folks and can bring them up. If folks call me, I'll bring your property up and we'll help you work through it. So you understand what's happening. You won't be able to see your 2022 values until likely New Year's Day. It's usually when the system rolls over, but your history's out there and you have your card for what the projected value is for next year. Right. And we're going to plan on doing some follow-up communication. I know that the county commissioners are doing a communication countywide soon. I want to dovetail right behind there so we're consistent, but that's a great point. And it's one of the reasons, that's the reason why I added the item to the agenda as a discussion point for this evening. Right. And so that's why I want to try to start raising awareness with the issue this evening. We'll have some communication that'll come from the district. And again, county commissioners are also going to be putting a communication together on what their strategies are to effectively not have a tax increase on real estate in 2022 for Warren County. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Next on the agenda are the consent approval items for the superintendent. May I have a motion to approve these items or this one item?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Any questions?
Mr. Belfram, just to clarify, it is one item, but there are 4 trips.
Yes, there are
correct?
4
Okay.
trips, the one item.
Okay.
Mr. Sears, did you have anything to add? All right, Mr. Furnace.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Bidwell,
Yes.
Mr. Belfram,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Egan.
Yes.
Next on the agenda are the consent approval items for the assistant superintendent, HR and business. May I have a motion to approve these items?
I'll make that motion.
Second the motion. If we could, I don't want to put you on the spot, Mr. Spinner, but could you just speak to our policy review process, please, sir, and our readings?
Certainly. So we work with a company called Neola. There are 2 companies in the state of Ohio, the Ohio School Boards Association and Neola. Neola helps write our policies along with Ennis Britton attorneys who are also our law firm. A gentleman by the name of Dr. Norm Burkhart visits our school district quarterly and sits down with myself and other representatives of our district with regards to each policy. So if it has something to do with student programming or curriculum, we may call Mr. Freeman in, special education. Mrs. Martin may sit with us. Anything from a business operations side, I may ask Mr. Lucky to join me, or from the treasurer's financial aspects, I may have Mr. Furness sit down. Many of these policies are updates with regards to Ohio Revised Code. If there are changes in ORC, our policies are updated to meet those standards. And a lot of them have very minor tweaks in language to incorporate those updates. For instance, policy 8330 talks about student records and it incorporates student email addresses. So it's updating with regards to the technology that students have in today's use at school. We have 2 readings. Well, first reading is usually in the second week of the month at our first work session, and then a second reading for board policy later in the month. I try to review the ones that have the most amount of changes, as I did in our last meeting. There were 3 particular policies that I pulled out. One had to do with participation, public participation for our residents students or employees of the district and the decorum that goes along with that. Another had to do with student abuse and neglect. We also talked about PBIS and PBIS and the use of restraint and seclusion. So those are the ones that had the major changes. Others are an update in terminology, minor tweaks to the language so as to make them more current for today's educational world.
Thank you, Ms. Spinner. Any other questions? Mr. Furnace?
Mr. Belfram,
Yes.
Mr. Bidwell,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Egan,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
See, there are no items from Mrs. Martin this evening. No items to be presented by the board. So may I have a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Furnace?
Mr. Bidwell,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Egan,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Belfram.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned at 7:06 PM.